All right, we are going to be evaluating some exponential functions. This is Math 209, week 5. All right, so what does that mean? So when we evaluate functions, basically it means take the value of x, stick it into your function. All right, so when we do that, in this case, f of x starts out as being 5 raised to the x power. But now we're going to replace the x with a negative 1. So that becomes 5 raised to the negative first power. Now that's the answer, but we want to simplify it. And so whenever you have a negative exponent, that means you need to stick it into the denominator, and then the exponent becomes positive. So 5 to the negative first becomes 1 over 5 to the positive first, and that is equal to 1/5, because 5 to the first power is equal to 5. So the answer is 1/5. So doing that again, so now it's just going to get a little bit more complicated, no big deal. So we start off with f of x is equal to 5 times 2 raised to the x power. And this 5 means we're going to replace the x with a 5. And so we've got 5 times 2 raised to the 5th power. And so to simplify that, that means 5 times, and then it's going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. All right? So when I use a calculator, 2 raised to the 5th power, that gives me 32. So this becomes 5 times 32, and that is, and I'm using a calculator here, so that equals 160, and that is your answer. So more of the same, only the equations are going to get a little bit more complicated. So when we have f of x is equal to 1/3 raised to the x power, and they want us to replace that x with a negative 3. A negative 3. So that becomes 1/3 raised to the negative 3rd power. And the way we're going to simplify that negative 3rd power, we learned in a previous series of videos, previous weeks, that you take this fraction and you reverse it, 3 over 1, and then that exponent is now allowed to be a positive 3. And so that ends up equaling basically 3 raised to the 3rd power, which means 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. So there is your answer. All right, more of the same. So we know that our original function is 5 times 4 raised to the negative x, and we want to figure out the value of this function, evaluate the function when x is negative 3. So here's the thing. F is negative 3. All right, I mean f of x. F of negative 3, sorry. So that becomes 5 times 4 raised to the, now here's the thing, that x is already a negative, plus we're going to add in another negative, so it becomes negative 3. That's what it is. Now I'm going to be explicit about that, because that then becomes 5 times 4 raised to the positive 3rd, because that negative 3 is the same thing as positive 3. And so this becomes 5 times 4 times 4 times 4. And I don't know what 4 times 4 times 4 is, so I'm just going to use my handy-dandy calculator, and I'm going to do 4 raised to the 3rd power. That gives me 64. So that becomes 5 times 64, and times by 5, that equals 320. And there is our answer. Now here is pure calculator work. Pure calculator. So if you have, we're going to begin with f of x is equal to 2.7 raised to the x power. And they're saying replace that x with 2.1. So that becomes f of 2.1 there, is equal to 2.7 raised to the 2.1. So this thing right here, there's no way you're going to do it by hand. You're just not. So you're going to use a calculator, and you're going to type in. Now, oftentimes your calculator will have a button that'll say XY. It'll be this button that you need to use in order to type this in. So oftentimes what you're going to do with your calculator is you're going to type in 2.7, and then you're going to hit the XY button, and then you're going to type 2.1. So that's often what you're going to do with your calculator. So I don't know how to indicate that. So like there's a button there and there. That's what you're going to type in to your calculator. And when you do that, in my case, I'm going to do that. So 2.7 XY 2.1. And when I do that, I get this god-awful, horrible, long answer. It's 8.051260985, etc., etc., etc. But the directions up here say round to the nearest hundredth. Right there, round to the nearest hundredth. So when we do that, the nearest hundredth, so the hundredths place is the 5. So that's the nearest hundredth, and the 1 tells you to round down. So we're just going to put into my math lab answer 8.05. And the last problem for this video is we're going to find f of -2, which means we're going to take that original function and replace the x with a -2. All right, and so first thing we have to do is figure out this value right here. And so that means it's going to be 5 times, and it's going to be 1 over 0.6 raised to the second power. All right, and so how are you going to do that? Well, it's going to be 5 times. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I might take this and I'm going to type in 1 divided by 0.6, and I'm going to get a decimal. But then I'm going to hit the XY button because I want to raise it to the second power. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in 1 divided by 0.6. So I'm going to clear my calculator. 1 divided by 0.6, and I get this long repeating decimal. But I'm not going to freak out because now I'm going to raise it to the second power. So I'm going to do the XY button, and I'm going to type in 2. And I still get this long repeating number. And now I'm going to take that answer and multiply by 5. So really, I don't need this 5 right here because I'm going to be able to do all my calculations in the calculator right now. And so I'm going to multiply by 5. And when I do that, I get 13 point, and it's going to say 8 forever. And because they're telling us to round to the nearest hundredth place, the nearest hundredth place is right there. So this 8 tells me to round up. So my answer is going to be 13.89. All right. So there you go. Now they wanted us to solve it as a decimal because it says so right up here, decimal. Really on this one, the fraction would have been the easier way to solve the problem, but because we have a calculator, decimals are okay. And so that's how we do that one.